Welcome to This Week in Legal Blogging. This is Kevin O'Keefe, founder of LexBlog, and I don't know if I can fill his shoes, but I'm sitting in for Bob Ambrogi, the regular host of the show. Our guest, Eric Turkewitz, probably upset that Bob isn't here. But anyway, the show is produced by LexBlog. We're the largest legal blogging community and network in the world with 30,000 publishers, and provide a platform to lawyers so that they can do their digital publishing on the net and then have their content aggregated and curated across the LexBlog network. Each week we try to reach out to a good blogger. I'm honored to be talking with Eric today. He's about as good as it gets. And we'll broadcast it across the various social networks, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, so that anybody can have access to it anytime. I've known Eric since really the beginning of blogging. He's been publishing a blog on New York personal injury law. Since that time, he covers both injury and medical malpractice. I don't want to put words in Eric's mouth, but I think his blog was a labor of love to start with. And he's been publishing it for 14 years. So welcome to the program, Eric. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate
it. How did you ever get, you said, okay, I'm going to do this blog thing. You realize
I had a slow week.
That's about right.
Like I knew what I was doing, right?
Right.
Nobody who starts blogging knows what they're doing.
Right.
I had a slow week. I said, why don't I try this blogging thing? I had my tech guy mock something up, and I just started typing. And I would scramble around at the beginning looking for things that I thought were interesting, under the theory that if I found it interesting, other people might find it interesting. And sometimes I was right and sometimes not, like any writer.
Yeah. How long have you been practicing?
Oh, God. 35 years.
Always in New York, obviously.
Always in New York.
Yeah.
It's not a very portable profession.
No, it's not, is it? It's not like, hey, I moved out to LA last year. At some point, it should be. At some point, somebody should say, I should be able to live someplace else and still do a good job representing people. But right now, it's not. You grew up in New York?
I spent my whole life in New York. I grew up out on Long Island. I went to school in Albany. Then after that, I went to law school in Buffalo. Then I came down and lived in Manhattan. Now I'm in Westchester. I have got New York State running through my pores.
I still feel it my own. I'm a native of Queens, but didn't stay there very long. What made you want to be a lawyer? At some point in time, you said, I think I'm going to do this thing.
I followed in my father's footsteps.
Okay.
And it wasn't, I'm one of four boys. And my father never suggested anybody become a lawyer. In fact, he had probably discouraged it. Even back then, he was saying that they're going to legislate, because all he did was medical malpractice litigation. And I basically learned at his knee. And he ran a team of 10, 12 malpractice lawyers, which was a pretty good sized department.
Yeah.
And he said, they're going to legislate us out of business, go do something else. My three brothers all listened to that. And I thought it was interesting. So I did it. He used to come home at dinner, and he would give us his opening statement around the dinner table. And then he would pass a pen around the table to the four of us. He said, write down on a napkin what you think the case is worth. Yet you couldn't say it out loud. You had to write it down because otherwise you might be influenced by what the kid next to you said. I'd say, Dad, I'm 10 years old. What do I know about what this is worth? And he would say, what does any juror know?
Right.
Just write down what you think is fair and reasonable. Now, the concept of the mock jury was not a term that I heard as a 10-year-old. And frankly, even practicing lawyers weren't using the term mock jury. It's something that's, the last couple of decades has come to the forefront. But that's what we were. He would bounce it off us the same way other people might bounce a case off of some friends when you go out to dinner. What do you think of this? And that's what he did. And that's what got me interested.
Yeah, I used to do that in bars. Just your average bar, you buy somebody a beer, and I want to run this by you.
That was
And
your pickup line, huh?
yeah, that was I can only imagine falling into the fabric of real life, because medical malpractice cases and trying cases and jurors, it's a fabric of life. It's real things going on impacting lots of people with multiple moving parts. And you're sitting there as 10 years old hearing this across the dinner table. I mean, like it's normal.
Yeah, you hear about a botched hysterectomy as a 10-year-old, and my father is busy describing a uterus as an upside down milk bottle. But he's describing it the same way he has to describe it to a jury, because most people will not know any of the medicine. You have to start with the basics. And that's what I do. When I go out, when we have trials, obviously we don't have any for the last year, but you have to start with the basics. And when I take depositions of doctors and I ask them to explain something, I'll say, explain it as if you're talking to a 14-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. And I assume his office must have been right in Manhattan, or where was it?
It was.
Yeah.
He started in Brooklyn.
Did it?
He started in Brooklyn and then went to Manhattan. Yeah.
Yeah. So where was this office located in Manhattan?
It was down on Church Street.
Really?
Started on Broadway and then he went to Church Street. Yeah. It's just a few blocks away from the courthouse.
Yeah. Yeah. What a great ride. 10 lawyers doing medical malpractice work. That is a lot of force. And you got to also be willing to carry that ups and downs to the expense, of everything.
Well, when you have that kind of volume, they were known. This was the firm is called Fuchsberg and Fuchsberg, and the guy who founded the firm, Jack Fuchsberg, ultimately went up to New York's highest court, the Court of Appeals, and he was the head of the department. The firm had maybe 30, 35 lawyers at its peak, of which about a third was doing exclusively medical malpractice, and he ran that department, and that was his domain, and everybody answered to him. And he would keep his book and he would keep track of the hundreds of cases that came through, and the concept of cash flow that a solo practitioner now has to worry about. I was an employee.
Got paid.
It didn't enter my mind what it meant to pay the rent and to pay the staff.
Yeah, great story. And don't tell me your grandfather was a lawyer too.
No. My grandfather on my father's side immigrated from what is now Ukraine, sits on the border of Ukraine and Belarus, and went into the garment district.
There you go. Also in New York.
Very New York, the schmata business.
Yeah.
They would knock off dresses from higher end people, and then my father from there went to law school. My mother worked as a teacher while he went through law school, and I hate to say it's a typical immigrant story, but it's a typical immigrant story.
Yeah.
He went to City College, which was free, and then he went to Brooklyn Law School, and then he started up his own firm with the kid who was sitting next to him, because it was alphabetical order. So it was Turkewitz and Tessel, because they became friends sitting next to each other, and that's how it started.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Did either of your folks live to see your blog?
Yeah. My mom didn't. My father did, but he doesn't.
Right.
He doesn't. He's 90. He doesn't go online to look at stuff.
No, but I'm even realizing that here we're doing this stuff in a totally different world, and it's a different world, but it's similar. Back in the day, you go back to the Abe Lincoln days, and what would people do? They would go to the local tavern after court, and they would bounce ideas off each other. And then you'd have bar associations. What would people do? They would bounce ideas off of each other. People still do the same thing, except now they do it electronically, whether they're doing it in a listserv or they're doing it in blogs or even sometimes on Twitter, if you can find an intelligent conversation. The concept of the need to communicate and to share ideas is always there.
You should never
Always.
assume that you know everything. You can always learn from somebody else.
Yeah, and I think it's so lost sight on lawyers today. And we're having a beer because I think, first time we may have met would have been I hosted these Beer for Bloggers events, and it might have been pretty small, the first one in New York, where Eric came, and I'm all excited that Eric is there, and Scott Greenfield's there. It's like,
Scott
wow.
Greenfield, yeah.
And now we're going on a further aside, and I'm sitting there asking you questions about different things, and you said, well, I represented some early people in a AOL community, and it was David and Tom Gardner that did the Motley Fool, I believe, where you did some work.
I did some
Or
work.
they
for
were in
them.
the next office or something. I don't remember the whole story.
They were down in Virginia. I think that's probably still
Okay.
there. And they were on AOL. You can get to the Motley Fool by keyword fool or keyword Elvis back in the day. until AOL took Elvis away from them. And this was the Wild West. People would write things in forums, whether it was stock advice or something that was plagiarized, copyrighted material. There could be harassment that's going on. Could be anything. And so I started to give them some advice on how to deal with this stuff. This was before the Communications Decency Act came out, before we had Section 230 that protects people like me now. Somebody writes something in the comments of my blog, it was like,
sorry, yeah,
I didn't write it. Don't blame me. People focus, when they talk about Section 230, they focus on the big shots, but it's the little shots that got to worry also. If somebody writes something, how am I supposed to know if they present a fact, whether it's true or false?
Yeah, I remember sitting next to you at dinner. We're at Virgil's Rib House and down off Times Square. And you had, the fact that you had talked to these guys, and I had talked to them, asking them if they would let me use their message boards for a virtual law community that I was building. It was basically going to be the equal of Motley Fool for the law.
Okay.
And those guys said, I don't know if it was Tom or David, and they said, well, you got to understand, we build stuff to use it. We don't build it to license it because we're good people and we'll feel the obligation to keep it up. We won't have anybody to do it. But it very much was the wild, wild west at that point in time. And
really
going back to this point that you raised about, you're still learning things, you're still communicating, you're still networking. It's the same things that went on in Abe Lincoln's time.
Yeah.
There's no way that we would have sat down at that table, but for blogging, with these type of people. And I think right before then I had gone over and met, I can't think of Olson's first name. Yeah, here I am sitting across the street, across from that place, having a beer with Walter Olson, who was doing different type of work, who was with the Manhattan Institute at the time. And I'm thinking, this is pretty amazing. He thinks I'm of some significance, and him. And I don't think lawyers realize that it's not trying to get up in the search engine rankings that your blog is trying to do for you, and that people are going to think you're brilliant and they call the 800 number at the top. It's just being out there and hanging out, sharing things, talking about things. Word gets around if somebody knows something, and if they have a need, somehow cases come in different types of ways. So I don't know how you look at blogging from the standpoint of how you've met people, what it does for your profile, how you get to engage, have relationships that you wouldn't have.
First of all, when I'm writing stuff, the harder anybody tries to game the system, the worse the content looks.
Yeah.
Always, without exception. You can tell right away if something has been keyword stuffed because they're writing for Google instead of writing for humans. A long time ago, another blogger said, the inbound link is the holy grail of blogging. That someone was you. And it stuck with me. That was, 13, 14 years ago. Write what you like, write what's fun, because if you don't, it's going to suck.
Yeah.
It's going to look like work. It's not, nobody would going to read it, let alone link to it. So when I write, some are better than others, like anything else. And
Right.
Sometimes you try to inject a little humor, always try to use a casual voice. This is not a brief you're writing to the court, although my blogging has affected how I write my briefs.
Sure it has. Yeah.
It has. I have
Yeah.
stripped out a lot of the formality that's wholly unnecessary. And I try to write as if somebody is reading it on an iPad on with the feed up.
Right.
And which is not easy if you're writing a brief, but it still has to be engaging. And even though I'm practicing out, in the public with the blog, it helps to make you a more engaging writer. The more you write, the better you get at it.
Right.
And if you're writing stuff that you hate to write because it's boring, if you're writing about the local car accident down the street, you don't want to be writing that. You're writing that because you think you're going to game Google somehow, or somebody's going to find you. It's like the worst thing you can do, other than writing about yourself. It's terrible stuff, and it's the stuff that people have to avoid at all costs. Almost all costs. There are very, very rare exceptions when you can write about one of your own cases. They exist, but I think I've probably done it once in 14 years.
When when I got to the internet, 96, 97, started answering people's questions, I was practicing as a plaintiff's trial lawyer. And I said, this is the greatest thing in the world for plaintiff's trial lawyers. It's a great equalizer. And in fact, it's for the good lawyers that don't necessarily have this war chest of money that they can run ads, TV, radio, yellow pages. That lawyers could just be themselves and think about what they're doing to share information with people in a down-to-earth way, like you just described. Well, 20 some years later, I would say plaintiffs' lawyers are almost the worst on the internet in the way they you read it, sometimes I want to recruit more plaintiffs' lawyers to blog, and other times I go, no, I don't want any of it, because it's so few. If I was recruiting plaintiffs' lawyers all year long, there'd probably be 5 that I would be proud of at the end of a year. So imagine, a lawyer asking you that, respected you, let's say they're a board member of the State Trial Lawyers Association or a member of VOTA, and they said, I like the way you tone when you speak with people. I've read some of your posts, and I like that too. What should I do as a plaintiff's trial lawyer when I'm blogging? How should I start? What should I be thinking about? What do I write?
Find anything.
They're getting so much misinformation from the yahoos that show up at their conferences to tell them how to do internet marketing.
The answer is always you have to find what's interesting to you, because if you find something that's not interesting, you're not going to keep at it.
Right.
You're gonna say this is boring after 2 or 3 months, and you'll be done with it. So you have to, if reading the advance sheets and reading about like the current state of various cases in your area of practice are interesting, have at it.
Right.
Some people love procedure, and they can find humor, and they can find a lot of interesting things in procedure. Some people hate it, and they'll look for obscure cases or funny cases, like Lowering the Bar. Kevin Underhill's, he's awesome. He's been doing it for God knows how long, and he's still writing. It's clear that he loves what he loves to write this way. Does it bring him any business? Who knows? I don't think he cares.
But even, sometimes when you say it doesn't bring people business, it brings them notoriety. And I just use that in a good way, not any negative or positive, whatever. People just get to know them for who they are. I tell people, I said, if a lawyer was hanging around in a Facebook group that had to deal with their large town or something, they're just being a good person. Somebody asks a question about where to go to get this, nothing to do with law, people will know them. And they might actually, the word might get around that they're a lawyer too, and somehow that's all it is. Doing those type of things. In addition to, I also know you from running, because although you keep it up. I ran my last marathon, I think in '99, when I ran them, multiple times a year, beginning in the late '70s. I mean, you're probably still going. We don't get to have big ones now because we got the pandemic. But,
I'm not, let's just say that I'm not as fast as I used to be. I'm lucky if I get out there. If I'm, I just, please don't be injured.
Yeah, that's my guy at the running store. He brought out these pair of Hokas with the big things, and I'm going, I don't want shoes like that. He goes, listen, you're older, you're slower, and you ain't
You're like, thanks a lot.
You ain't chasing anybody around it. You ain't chasing anybody down when you're out training. He goes, you just don't want to get hurt.
It's funny, but so I've run a bunch of marathons, and God willing, I'll still be able to do it. And I started up a local trail race, a half marathon trail race.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you about.
Right, and so it's merely I do it as it's a hobby, it's a passion, and I get out there, and we now get maybe it was canceled last year, but we've been averaging about 700 runners for a half marathon trail race. Yeah, I send people off in 5 waves and go racing down the trail, and it has a colonial theme, and because it starts at the Thomas Paine Cottage, and also Norman Rockwell used to live in the same town. So I try to make it as a combination of, if Thomas Paine and Norman Rockwell met each other and created a race, what would it look like? And so that's my motto. But and there's nothing corporate about it. As a result of which, everybody knows me. Now, that wasn't the objective. The objective was just to have, these are really cool trails. Let's improve them. The way to improve them is to put on a race, and they get used more. Municipalities come and say, oh, look, they're getting used. Let's put some money into it. But that whole idea of just getting out there in the community and doing stuff, a lot of people know what I do as a result. Not because I sit there and bang my horn about it, which I would never do, because then people would run the other way. But the more people that know you, the more chance there is, know you for the right reason, the more chance it is that business will come your way for the right reason. Not because you're out there running ads.
When did you, maybe it was because you had the exposure, with your dad and the firm and everything. Maybe you learned that earlier. It took a long time for me to realize that, to say, just relax, do the things you enjoy, be yourself, help other people, and the work will come. I said that to myself many times, and I said that to my team many times. I basically got kicked out of the firm I was at because I was going around telling people that the more people we help, the better off we will be. And so we just have to help people. And I only got about 4 or 5 people to believe it. Well, they came with me when I left. But the rest of the firm was very much cutthroat as to how we're doing to get work and marketing and all that stuff. And I was like, well, I didn't want to tell them that, but maybe you don't want to be married 3 times. That doesn't impress people in a 50,000 person community. We got 3 lawyers who've been married 3 times. It doesn't do it. But when did you start to realize that and it really clicked? And you said, this is what really life and being a lawyer and having a business is all about.
I kind of fell into my own practice by accident. I had worked at my dad's firm for 2.5 years after law school. Then I took a year off and backpacked around the world. Kevin, you froze. Oh, now you're back. I'm frozen. And when I came back, I said, well, that was a lot of fun. Maybe I'll do that again. I'll work for 6 months and then take off 6 months. But I could not become an associate someplace if I was planning to do that. So I just went out on my own making per diem appearances for people. And I had a wealth of experience. In 2 years, I had taken over 100 depositions of doctors. That was solid experience.
Yeah.
And so I could walk in any place and say, oh yeah, you want me to handle this conference? You want me to handle this deposition? Sure. They knew who I was. I had built a reputation of competence. And eventually it turned into a practice, from doing per diem stuff. Then people started giving me trials. Then cases just started coming to me for the right reasons.
Right. And so, that and the New York moxie of knowing that I can do this, that I have value to offer. It's just common sense to you.
I'm gonna-
I look at it as, I mean, I really do look at somehow people in New York have this common sense understanding about what they're capable of doing, the value they can offer to other people, and that other people will compensate them for it. But now they might have to go out and let people know that once in a while. They can't sit there all the time. You go to networking events, you might go to bar events, work gets around.
Well, I'll tell you, I started when I went out on my own. I ordered some business cards. Then I cut one up and I taped it to a piece of paper and I Xeroxed it onto good paper. Now I had letterhead. So I made my first letterhead. And I had a Smith Corona that I typed up reports for. I didn't have my own clients. Everything was per diem. There was certainly no computer for me back then. And that's it. It was just going out there and I'd call up law firms that I had people that they already knew me. They had seen me in court. They knew what I was capable of. I had tried a couple of cases already by that point. And it was not a problem for somebody to hand me a file and say, okay, go take care of this. And it just kind of grew organically from that. There was never a master plan. It was just go out there, do a good job, and hopefully business will come. And what's the worst that happens? That I become an associate someplace if it doesn't work out.
I mean, Lexblog had, I think I copied something off the web, put that onto an 8.5 by 11. That was my letterhead. And and for products, I would just key up the title of the product and the 7 features that it had. And that would be what I would send people. And when I got real sophisticated, my computer came with this app that Microsoft had these, maybe it was Apple, had these preset forms that we're supposed to use, but I didn't know how to use them. So I had to I had to take the pictures of blogs on the internet and replace the houses that were in these flyers. And I could only use the amount of text that was there to describe the house, to describe what we offer. And that's what I used. I mean, hell, I walked the streets of New York, but literally, I mean, I would email people and tell them I was coming, and then I would have these things. I probably thought I was doing fine. Now, people would ask questions. I don't know, over at Latham and Watkins, they would have been very impressed with that. But it gets by. How's the practice going today?
Well, certainly things are slow during the pandemic.
Right.
There are no trials. Everything's getting all backed up.
Right.
And the insurance companies know this.
Yeah.
And what we really need here in New York is some solid legislation for bad faith settlement practices by insurance companies. So amongst the other things that I do is one of them is lobbying with the New York State Trial Lawyers Association for things just like that. I mean, when somebody steps into your office, you know this, they're coming in and you are, for whatever issue it might be, if you are on the consumer side of the law, personal injury or criminal defense or immigration, you are their last best hope for whatever problem it is that they have.
Right.
And so you want to go out there and battle for it, usually against, whether it's the government or corporate giants, what have you. And it's a perspective that you learn, and then you can hopefully channel that into legislation that's going to help. And in this case, I've got file cabinets here with all, my clients in it, and the cases are not getting to where they have to be. And they won't be for some time. And that's an issue for the legislature in Albany to take care of.
Yeah, because if you can't get a trial date, there's no motivation for the insurance company to settle it. And so they're going to sit on it and know that it's clogging things up for you and your clients. That's a shame.
The rule of thumb when I started out was cases, and it was true in medical malpractice cases. Cases don't settle until a jury's in the box. And you can have a sponge that was left behind or a clamp that was left behind. They wouldn't even ask you for a number. When the jury's picked, then you go appear in front of the judge and say, okay, judge is going to say, let's talk. Years down the road.
Yeah, we used to talk over dinner, my wife and I, once the fall hit. How's this year going to wrap up? It was all dependent on how many cases were set for trial.
Right.
And if something was coming up in January or February, we realized it was good. It could have been a good year, but probably not. It's going to roll into next year.
When you're a small practice, all it takes is one case to change whether you had a good year or a crappy one.
Yeah, and it changes everything. It changes how you feel. I could sit and talk with you all day. I'm drinking a beer from the Georgetown Brewery in Seattle called Lucille.
I've got a Lagunitas, a little something, and I was not paid for that plug.
Nor was I, but you were pleasant enough to drop me a note. I think on Twitter. I don't know whatever we exchanged it. He said, "Hey, we should have a beer. I'll run down to the deli and grab one." And I'm thinking, well, I can walk to the refrigerator.
Listen, you did so many beer for bloggers events. I figured it was appropriate.
Yeah, I just have no idea how those started. I really just don't remember the. Before there was Twitter and all that type of stuff, everybody talked on blogs. So if you wrote something, I might see it, or somebody else may mention what you saw on their blog. And it was like a giant conversation. So I used to get to the airport and I go, I'll buy beers at 5:30 to 7 at this bar. I had no idea where the bar, what the bar was. People would come and
I want to meet people.
You want to meet people. And then I'm realizing, well, this is kind of cool because these people live out on Long Island or they live up in Connecticut, and they're staying in town to have a beer. I explained to other companies and other lawyers. I said, some companies go spend all this money for marketing and advertising. I said, if all hell breaks loose some night, it's going to cost me $250.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you knew it, but people started to want to get in on it. One night, Thomson Reuters bought all the beer because they wanted to split the notoriety of co-sponsoring Kevin O'Keefe's Lexbox Beer for Bloggers. And then
Did you let them?
Yeah. I've given them so much grief over the years, but now they want to pay for the beer. So it just goes to show you that what you said before about be yourself, do the things you enjoy, get out and spend time with people. Yours is everything from the law to being involved in, putting together a road, a trail race, an association. You're doing things for good people. It's pretty good.
You're gonna have to get your running legs back and come out to New York at the time of the race.
Here, this is all hills. So on a day where you don't do anything, you have to go 350 feet up vertical. Okay. If you're doing anything more than 4 miles, 4 or 5, it's going to be over 400 feet. So all of a sudden you go out and do like a 5 or 6 miler, it's 600 feet vertical up, And so the first
It's good for you.
The first couple of weeks, I'm thinking, well, this isn't going to work because I can't come up that every day to my house. And then it comes around. I know the people that are looking out their window going, is that guy walking or is he running? And I probably can't tell the difference.
It's a fine line.
Isn't it?
Sometimes.
Yeah. When you look at your watch and the other person goes by and you're going, they're really running slow and I'm doing worse than that. It's not like the old days, is it? Well, thank you very much, for being here. Maybe we'd even do it again. Next week, we're going to do the same thing. Bob Ambrosi will be back. We have Jason Gavahan, who does a privacy and data security blog out of Jackson Lewis. I think it's the same size firm as yours. And again, check out the full series. My son Colin and the team over on the publishing side has put together, a good library of everything. So welcome to the library.
Good to be here.
And cheers.
Cheers, Kevin. Good seeing
you. Till we see each other again. Take care.
In real life. Bye.
That's right. That's what I meant.